Welcome back to NeoLearn. Dear friends, let us discuss I believe that books will never disappear. An interview with Jorge Luis Borges. I believe that books will never disappear is a part of Experts from 24 Conversations with Borges interviews of Jorge Luis Borges by Roberto Alifano. This is basically in the form of an interview where two men of literature get an opportunity to discuss various issues related to life and literature. Jorge Luis Borges is a short story writer, an essayist, a poet, and a translator. His famous works include varied concepts like dreams, libraries, mirrors, philosophy, religion, and God. Roberto Alifano, poet, storyteller, essayist, and journalist. He was born in the city of General Pinto, province of Buenos Aires in 1943. As Alifano, the person who interviewed Borges knew well the areas of his interest. He asked questions pertaining to the same. Here, he talks about his early years of reading, his family, his blindness, books, poetry, metaphors, and literature. Dear friends, let us discuss one by one in detail. First, literary reading. Borges proudly says when he was asked a question regarding his first literary reading that he was educated at his father's library where he first read Grimm's fairy tale. Alifano wanted to know the first great literary work that Borges had studied. As an answer to it, he said his father's library as he felt that the collection of books was so huge that he could again and again he gained a comprehensive knowledge of various subjects. In fact, his father was a lawyer and had a great collection of books also in his home. Borges appears to be very emotional when he describes his mother. He recollects how she had been so huffled. On the other hand, he could not reciprocate that affection, and a sense of guilt buried in him explodes during this conversation. His mother was an extraordinary person, but he regrets having not been understanding of her. Besides, his mother was an intelligent and a gracious woman who had no enemies. As a general observation, he tells that all children are born to take their mother for granted and will realize her importance when she is no more with them. When asked about blindness, the entire episode is viewed in a philosophical way. As the proverb says, we have to accept the changes which we cannot change. He says to accept whatever comes in our life. When he tells people that all such negative aspects are given as a raw materials and only a few of them can transmit them and convert their miserable condition into an accomplishment. Blindness to Borges is a way of life. He calls it a resource and that all things have been given to us for a purpose. Humiliations, our misfortunes, our embarrassments are given to us as a raw materials so that we may shape our art. He says, still he pretends that he is not blind. He further feels that he has to enjoy that period of strife and should also pretend that he is not blind and that is the main reason he bought books and filled his library with them. Borges says that he still buys books. In every book, he finds a need for something more. For this, he takes the reference of Goethe's writings also. When he was asked about books, he tells, first of all, he talks on his dream in which he saw the library of Alexandria burning with its countless volumes. Later, he reveals is the thought of writing a book of history. He says that book goes beyond the author's intention. A book can be full of errors, but the book always retains something sacred, something moral, something magical which brings happiness. Trying to interpret a dream in a way Borges did not did or does is quite unique because at the age of 83, a blind mind is ready to take up a challenge of trying to write a book on the history of books is not very man's outlook. He believes that poetry is something so intimate, so essential, that it cannot be defined without oversimplifying it. Poetry is the aesthetic act, he says. It is the poetic act that takes place when the poet writes it and the reader reads it. Poetry is a magical, mysterious, and unexplainable event. He says that if one doesn't feel the poetic event upon reading it, the poet has failed. Trying to explain the nature of a book or piece of literature, he explains the same keeping the reader in mind. When a poet has created something and he fails to make the reader understand, then the entire process of creation is a failure or it's a futile attempt. Poetry is a magical, mysterious, and unexplainable event, but it is not something that cannot be comprehended without the involvement of the reader. When he was asked about the precise words or metaphors, he says, precise words are what elicit the emotion. Metaphors exist from the beginning of time. He seems to reduce all metaphors to five or six, which are essential metaphors. They are time and river, life and dreams, death and sleep, stars and eyes, flowers and woman. Quoting Emily Dickinson, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies. He explains how the inclusion of two words, gentlemen and ladies, in the place of men and women creates magic and enhances the poetic quality. Further, he says about metaphors and why they are very important and an integral part of literature. Borges is very confident that never, ever in the future, books could be replaced by something else, and the reason he quotes should be agreeable to everyone. He argues in a scientific way that feels that the other inventions of man are just an extension of the physical body. The telephone, an extension of our voice, telescope and microscopes, extensions of sight, sword and plug are extension of our hands, but it is only the book which is the extension of imagination, memory, both abstract concepts which are not dependent on any external object. Borges believes that modern developments in the communications cannot replace books and that the books will never disappear. He says that book is the most astounding of many human inventions. All the other are extension of our body. Only the book is the extension of our imagination and memory. He concludes that if books disappear, surely history would disappear and surely man would disappear. When he was asked a question regarding literature, he says, literature is a controlled dream, and books are supposed to be the memories of all centuries. Therefore, irreplaceable, and that is the main reason. If books disappear, history would disappear. Indirectly, he gives a hint that man will also disappear. He says that literature is a dream. It must be controlled. Our past is a sequence of dreams. Books are the great memories of all centuries.